school feeding program is an investment. It's creating a generation. It will have a very good return back. Therefore, policymakers and also higher authorities has to focus and work for the next generation.
Hello, and welcome to the Power of the Public Plate podcast, brought to you by ICLEI, Local Governments for Sustainability, and the UN One Planet Network, with your host, myself, Josephine Hinz, based in ICLEI's Berlin office, responsible for global initiatives of sustainable, innovative, and circular procurement.
And I'm Peter De Franceschi, running ICLEI's Brussels office and global food program. ICLEI is a European and global network of local and regional governments committed to integrated, sustainable development.
And the UN One Planet Network works as a multi-stakeholder community across 6 programs, one of which is committed to the implementation of sustainable public procurement globally.
In this podcast, we explore the stories of champions of food procurement around the world.
In each episode, we bring you insightful and inspiring stories of how the public sector can influence the food value chain by leveraging its purchasing power.
Join us as we talk to public sector staff, policy advisors, and experts to learn how to support smallholder farmers, serve healthy and nutritious meals, source locally and climate friendly.
In this episode, we talk to Meti Tamrat in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. Meti is the advisor to the Addis Ababa city mayor on all things nutrition, and she also works as a board member of the school feeding agency. Meti is currently responsible for the implementation of the overall sustainable food system related program, which was launched with the aim to lift some of the burden the poorest citizens feel. In this episode, Meti and I explore how the program contributes to the attainment of sustainable development goals around zero hunger, quality of education, gender equality, good health, and well-being. We talk about how the program is able to bring benefits to entire communities by creating new employment opportunities for women specifically in Addis Ababa. Let's hear directly from her. I bring you Meti Tamrat. Welcome, Meti, to the podcast. It's such a pleasure to sit down with you and talk about your valuable work in Addis Ababa in Ethiopia. It's really an honor having you.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to join you. And also, it's my honor to be with you.
Before we talk about procurement and the program, I do want to just get a little taste of the flavors and the role of food in Addis Ababa. Perhaps can you describe some of the typical dishes people like to eat in Addis Ababa?
Okay, thank you. Yeah, as you know, injera with shirowet, most of the time they are cereals. Yes, we commonly eat injera with shirowet, injera with meat. And also, if you go to different places, we do have different kinds of foods. For example, if you go to the south, they mostly like raw meats and root foods, like beetroot, something like that, most of the time. If you go to the north, they commonly like to eat injera. It's from teff. If you go to the Oromia regions, maybe some of them commonly they like to eat porridge, like sorghum products, like that. Yeah. So, but in Addis, if you ask most people, we love eating injera. It's our staple food, I can say, and it's from teff, and also injera with shirowet, injera with misirwet, so that's our common foods.
Yeah, it sounds really tasty. Thank you for describing it a little bit. And perhaps kind of diving into the role of procurement and how is it organized in Addis? Is it centralized? Like how who has the mandate over procuring food, having this power of decision of what is being served, for instance, in schools?
In Addis Ababa, it's our capital city. More than 8 or 7 million people are living in Addis. And daily, the number of population is increasing because people migrate in large number. And also in our public schools, we do have large number of children, and so regarding to the quality of education, we face some kind of challenge. So we try to find out why students drop out, why there is high absenteeism. So finally, we found out that school feeding program can be a good pulling factor to keep students in school, and also to increase the quality of education indirectly, because students give more attention to their education, because there are also students who are coming from destitute families. So sometimes we observe that they face some kind of challenge to continue their class. So because of that, the former First Lady, Wizara Roman Tasfai, she started one project. We call it Year Network Charitable Association. And because of that, like more than 20,000 students were benefiting by school feeding program. And also there were some kind of NGOs and some kind of local donors who were working like from in Ethiopian calendar from 2007 up to 2010. We did such pilot programs. And then the former mayor of the city, Engineer Takaloma, he declared like all students has to get school feeding program, and it has to be one of the government priority agenda, because those the former first lady programs, different school feeding programs which were supported by parents and local communities were not covering all students, and those school feeding programs were targeting only very poor children. So it was creating some kind of discrimination, and he said it's not fair to give food for some for by separating the students, because it may have some kind of psychological problem. Plus, it was not addressing to all needy students. Therefore, because of that, from kindergarten, from KG up to grade 8 students of all government students who are learning in public school, in government school, are getting school feeding program twice a day, breakfast and lunch. So we also checked the difference, what happened after providing foods. So we saw quality of education a little bit increment within 3 years, very low absenteeism and the dropout. So it's really encouraging. So the current mayor also really supporting this school feeding program, and also she is adding now it has to be more nutritious, and it has to be even age specific, because before we were providing meals from KG up to grade 8, the same kind of meal, but now we are proposing, and the mayor is also proposing to change the menu, like for maybe for KG students and also for primary students, and also it has to be nutrition sensitive. So this was the point. And regarding to the procurement, the city modality or the Addis Ababa school feeding modality is different from other regions, because no, we do have in national policy framework, there are about 3 4 types of procurements: centralized, decentralized, semi-centralized, and the catering system. So now the Addis is a good example for catering system. So in catering system, we hire or we outsource women, and those women are most of them, more than 90% of them are parents of students, women's. One, there has to be women. One, the criteria, they have to be women, and also the mother of those students, and also women who are unemployed.
That's really amazing to hear. Just to pause here for a second and kind of focus on this, because I think this is really a significant characteristic of the program, where you say, okay, we have this catering context, so the food you're serving in schools is being cooked beforehand. It's not directly cooked in each school, but beforehand, right? And then you have some criteria as part of the procurement that make sure that a specific type of, let's say, the local population is also being supported through employment opportunities, right?
Yeah, because yeah, it has dual uses. One, it's economically supporting the woman, and the other main important thing, the women are feeding their students, so they show more kind of caring. They are the mother, so they give care for students. They cook food in school, so regarding to sanitation and hygiene, they are providing for their children, so it helps us to keep the safety of the food as well.
How does it work practically? How do you start engaging the local women and getting into these type of jobs? What kind of training do they receive, and how is it changing also the community's kind of reality?
Yeah, it's a good question. Yes, always before the mothers start cooking, we provide a training for them, training which is related to hygiene and sanitation, how to cook foods, how to provide food for kids, about the portion or the proportion, the amount of food. And mostly we focus, especially nowadays, there's a COVID issue, so we provide training relating to the COVID protocols as well.
Let's unpack the school feeding program as such a bit more. You mentioned so many aspects already, where it's really following nutrition guidelines, and it's making sure that children receive through the school feeding the nutrition they need. So that was one of the key challenges why the school feeding program was also implemented, right?
Yeah, regarding to the malnutrition issue, stunting, wasting, it's also a problem in our nation. As you know, more than 38% of Ethiopian population is suffered by stunting. There is high wasting, so it's a big problem. Therefore, we are working to incorporate school feeding package with nutrition package. For example, now the Ministry of Health launched the National Nutrition Strategy Policy. Therefore, we are working with Education Office and the Bureau to incorporate those packages with the school feeding program, like deworming, providing supplements, and also wash issues. Yeah, so in school, we can get, in one school, we can get thousands of kids and children, therefore educating and also providing those nutritious aspect and package will also help to, it's also, it can help for the community as well, because the students, they learn and they take those lessons to their parents for the community, so we can address it very easily, and especially adding to women also, from grade 7 and 8 we give more focus for those to consider and see the impacts of the nutrition on their life as well.
That's really interesting. Kind of how do you link it to the education? It kind of sounds like you're raising awareness as well through the meals being served with the school children. How are you enabling that? Is it included in lessons in school, or is there maybe an excursion to farmers around the city? How does it look like?
Yeah, it's interesting now, because when we established the school feeding agency, it has its own policy directives. So one of the points which were mentioned in the policy directives is school feeding is it needs a collaboration or coordination of other sectors. Therefore, there is steering committee in this issue. Therefore, the steering committee, like for example, from the wash part, water and sanitary office has to be part of this steering committee, because water is really important, and we do have some kind of shortage of water in school. Therefore, if there is school feeding program, water has to be there, so they have to follow such issues. In education bureau, we are working to include those nutrition packets in the curriculum, like in the biology, in social studies, like that. And also there is a club, there is a nutrition club, We work like nutrition club has to strengthen, has to give education for children, for the mothers, and also correlating with urban gardening. They have to work on urban gardening as well in their schools, because there are some schools with a good area or large compound to produce those green vegetables, so including them with school feeding, just to show them how it's working for the mothers to consider it in their procurement, and also to give lesson for teachers as well. Yeah, so we do in collaboration or in coordination.
And can you share with us how does it look like at a day-to-day level?
Yeah, as I mentioned before, school feeding needs collaboration or coordination among sectors. So then, even starting from the national policy and also implementing manuals and strategies were designed before from education sector. For example, the policy education, no, school feeding policy, school feeding implementing policy is prepared by the Ministry of Education, and also it's cascaded to the regional education bureaus. Therefore, mostly when we begin school feeding program, we mainly correlate it with quality of education. Therefore, the education gives more attention and focus to school feeding program. It's also implementing in schools. Therefore, school issues or is mandated to the education bureau. So regarding to school feeding program, now currently in Addis, even in school feeding agency, there is a policy directives which is clearly stated that school feeding is multi-sectoral. It needs multi-sectoral approach for implementation. Therefore, sectors around 8 sectors are involving in the implementation of school feeding program. For example, a very good example, education bureau, because school feeding program is implementing in schools with children, and discussing with teachers, school directors for implementation is very mandatory. And also in school curriculum, the school feeding issues, especially the nutrition package, are clearly stated in the curriculum, like eating balanced foods, and also how to prepare different kinds of foods, and relating it with health and also productivity. And also when we see the urban gardening part, in school feeding also, we want to show up for kids how to plant those vegetables, how to cook, and also, feeding and eating them is also important, because mostly students and also as a staple foods, people mostly like to eat injera with shrod, but instead of that, we want to we want to provide lesson for students to think also getting different kinds of vegetables, peppers, and also some kind of fruits which are produced in school. So we want to incorporate them in school feeding programs, because it gives not only providing foods, but also it gives lesson for students. And also another bureaus like water and sewerage bureau is also part of this committee, because in providing foods and also solid waste management, in cleaning the environment, and also giving training for the mothers how to keep the sanitation and how to make clean the canteen issue. So these all things show that school feeding is, it needs multi-sectoral approach for implementation, and also we are working in collaborating with different sectors.
It's really interesting to hear this multi-sectoral approach, let's say. And I'm particularly interested. So you mentioned this aspect of taking the school children to the urban farms. Does it mean that some of the food that some of the produce that is being included in the school feeding program and in the meals is actually grown directly kind of in the city or in at the outskirts of the city?
Currently, In the context of artists, it's difficult to continuously use products from school to the school feeding program because it's not enough. The amount of land which schools have is not enough to produce large amount of products. Therefore, it's difficult to directly correlate it with school feeding program. But in some aspects, for example, especially for KG students, maybe not from Monday up to Friday, but once or twice in a week, depending on the productivity, and it's not as such must to include, but we encourage them to think and see and use some products from school. So this approach is really working in other regions. In rural areas, this approach is really working because schools have large amount of land, therefore they produce different cereals and also vegetables and also different fruits like that because they do have a large hectare of land because it's a rural area. So they directly relate it with the school feeding program. But in our context in Addis Ababa, it's difficult. But we select schools with enough amount of land, and also just we encourage them to work in collaboration in by clubs, and also to give them to the mothers to incorporate in them, to include it in their meal. But it's not constant. We cannot use it from September up to June. It depends on the amount of product. Yeah.
There's a specific kind of season within the year where there's enough produce,
Yes.
kind of. Okay. And for the rest, kind of how are you sourcing it, or how are you put in, let's say, criterias that assure the produce you're getting has exactly those nutrients that you need for then serving those nutritious meals, assuring the health of the school children?
As I mentioned before, we are using the catering system, so the mothers are responsible to buy those ingredients to make food according to the menu. So we check the menu, they have to serve food based on the menu, and also we do have representative in schools who are directly checking the amount in the proportion of foods which is providing to the students, and also is it the based on the menu or not. And so the mothers has to, it's must to prepare food only based on the menu. So regarding to buying the food ingredients, they can buy it from different kinds of shops or markets. It's up to them. But we only check the food has to be prepared in school. It has to be fresh, and they have to serve based on the menu. It's not allowed to miss the menu. It's must to provide based on the menu. So they will check that, and if they have some kind of problem, they will inform us, and we will go and we will check what's happening there, why they are not keeping or following the menu, and what's the problem they are facing. So if they have some kind of challenge or inaccessible to buy some things, we will work with committees to think about it and to search or check or facilitate some other options for some others.
So it's really the, let's say, catering kitchens that are directly sourcing the produce they need, just to get a better understanding of, let's say, how big are those kind of catering kitchens, or how many are there, for instance, in Addis directly?
There are about 10,000 women who are working in school feeding program. And also what we did last year is for all 200, around 240 new kitchens were built last year by the support of World Bank and also the city administration. So in all schools there is a kitchen, standard kitchen with canteen, and also around 10,000 women are working in that part.
Right. And how are they connected to one another? I can imagine that also exchanging in between is very important, let alone to learn about new menu items or learning about each other's experience. Do you know if there's kind of, let's say, informal networks between the kitchens?
Yeah, because now we are in city administration, and also it is divided into 11 subsidies. So in 11 subsidies, in all subsidies, we do have the branch of the school feeding agency. So those officials and experts give training for the mothers with another subsidy. So mostly we organize a training session and also discussion session with the mothers, and then it helps them to exchange what's happening in one school, what problem they are facing, etc. And also we collect information and the data from those experts who are working in school. So that helps us to create a platform to coordinate, to talk each other, and to share experiences.
Right. So you're actually also monitoring a bit how the whole program evolves over time, and what are some perhaps of the lessons learned or some of the key insights that you've already gained?
Yeah, now our MND focuses first the benefit of students, how the students are changing, what's the benefit of school feeding program, how to create a value chain, and also we check how our procurement modality, is it working, is it good or not, what problems are facing in the mothers, and also we see sometimes best experiences from schools. For example, one of the best experience we take as in a school feeding program is some schools link school feeding program directly with, not directly, as I told you, not from Monday up to Friday, but they try to connect it with school gardening, and they add some vegetables and fruits from the garden. So we take this as a very good experience, and we try to share it to the other schools to see and take lesson, and also how to cooperate it with them. Yeah. So that's one of a good experience. The other one regarding to hygiene and sanitation, especially how they are keeping the canteen, is it clean, and also how they are really working, how the mothers are working to provide fresh and good and nutritious food for kids, even other than the menu, plus the menu. So we will take it sometimes that as one of the best experience, and we try to share it with others. One of a good experience that we take it last year is the the concern of the school directors and the engagement of the community. It was also one of a good experience. In some schools, we found out that the communities were really participating and engaged in supporting the school mothers, like for example in keeping the hygiene and sanitation of the canteen, and also working with them to educate students how to keep themselves from like coronavirus, something like that. Therefore, the engagement of school directors, the engagement of teachers in facilitating overall school feeding activities, it was also one of the good experience. So we select some schools as best schools regarding to that. So when we see the impact of Corona, maybe I can share you also one. It was before a year, during the Corona time, how students and mothers were suffering because of Corona. Because after the COVID pandemic, when it starts, as we know, the schools were closed, so everyone goes home. And later, after 5 months, we saw large number of students are coming out to get food, and because of this pandemic issue, they were keeping in house. So they were psychologically, they face some different kinds of problems. And also the mother's salary will depend on school feeding program. If there is no school feeding, there is no salary for the mothers. So therefore, the mothers will suffer a lot because of the COVID as well. So it has a very big negative impact both on the mothers and also students. And
Yeah, I'm actually wondering kind of how the recovery looks like in Addis right now or at the moment. I mean, the crisis is still, the pandemic is still a reality and very much unfolding. How is it looking now? How are you kind of recovering, or how was the program able to support them after the hard lockdown?
in lockdown time, we were working in different food banks in most subsidies. Therefore, we write letters. Now we are in mayor office, so we wrote letter for subsidy heads to consider mothers and also students as a priority when they provide food from the food bank. We gather food from different places, from different supporters, NGOs, from the government as well, and then we list out and we were providing foods for low income community. So we put the mothers and also the students from destitute families as a priority. So that was one the major. But after starting school, no, after the school reopens, I think things were recovered now. It's been like a year, we just the school calendar was already closed before 2 months, and now we have a new year. Now, this is our new year, 2014. As you know, our calendar is a bit different. So, the school reopens on Monday, and I hope it will continue as it is, because we already had experience last year with corona. For example, health extension workers were hired in all schools, so they check the temperature of students, they follow all the activities of students, they give training for the teachers how to teach with COVID protocols, etc. So we do have now a good experience, and when school opens, we started also school feeding program. So it's a good recovery because the mothers and the students really want to spend time in schools. That was our lesson from COVID time. In COVID time, they suffered economically. Students were just some of them, they were going out to work and other things, to bake, something like that. So regarding to economic problem, we also prefer to open school, and also better to try to implement COVID protocols.
I'm really glad to hear that you're starting the schools again, and everyone is ready to get back to cooking the meals in schools, and I'm actually also wondering to looking at your example in Addis. I'm sure that there are many that would like to kind of learn from your experience, especially how to navigate this very complex context of very, like, a lot of the kitchens that are sourcing their own produce, however trying to align what they're sourcing based on the menu that you designed. Kind of, what are some of the recommendations, or how do you see an opportunity for your program to scale up? Kind of, what would be required for this to grow further, or are there maybe already ideas on where to implement something similar?
Yes, this is different regarding to school feeding program, and we always feel proud that we are also ahead of many regions in Ethiopia. They come to us to take a lesson to start school feeding program, and also we always try to show how it's an investment. Even if it's costly, we are developing countries. We are so many priority problems, but we have to make school feeding as our priority agenda, because we are working on generation, and it's an investment. So based on that, we always give our lesson to other regions. But I think for us, we still need to do many things. For example, me, I feel that we have to check really the impacts of our modality. For example, now we are using the catering system. So maybe the centralized system, it can be better. So we have to check our system, which means it has to be the only modality for us or not. We have to check that. We have to see other opportunities and possibilities to scale up this school feeding program. I do believe that we are using catering system, it's effective and it's unique for us, but we have to see also other opportunities. I feel like that.
Yeah, right. So it's also about being open to reform kind of really at a very systematic level. Is that what you mean?
Yeah, it's what I mean. And also we have to more focus on the nutritious part now. In coverage, we are working good. All public school students are benefiting this program. So regarding to scale up this program, maybe to the high school level, and also we have to focus on the nutrition contents. Now, before we start school feeding program, we take a baseline data. So after maybe 2 years or next year, we will check its impact. So based on that result, we have to focus and work more on creating system regarding to data collection, MND system, and also we have to work on nutritious part, how to provide very nutritious food for our students. Yes, these are my recommendations for our program.
You mentioned also the word value chain before. What does it mean to you in the context of food, and why is procurement so important as an influence to the value chain?
Yeah, for example, now in school feeding program, the government allocated more than 1.7 billion. It's a huge amount of money for countries like us. So in school feeding, we have to work more to increase the output or the outcome of this program. So one of the point is creating a value chain, like relating, for example, now we are in the city, and also there are farmers and also local producers. Therefore, we have to create a very good value chain with those local farmers to get fresh foods. And also, like for example, I recommend starting school milk program, and also creating a value chain with the milk producers to the customers in school. Therefore, this is also another very good value chain. And also regarding to the cost, now currently, frankly speaking, it's very costly to buy different food ingredients in Addis in the city. Therefore, strengthening those value chains directly with the local farmers may help us to get fresh and good quality products with fair price. Therefore, to scale up this program and to make it more effective, we have to also work on the procurement and value chain.
Yeah, thank you for that. It really sounds like the key is to also think kind of long term. So of course it is an investment. It is associated with higher cost initially, but kind of long term, if building these, let's say, regional value chains, there is as a health and kind of nutritional benefit as well as an economic kind of benefit associated with that. It's really good to hear how you're describing that. And so let's transition to the words of wisdom. If you can kind of share, kind of in summary, kind of your perspective on let's say the power of the public plate. How would you how what would be your advice to fellow procurers, advisors, policymakers on where to start, what to keep in mind?
In my experience, before joining to this program, I was learning. I grew up in the city artist, and I didn't observe and I was not realized the impact of school feeding program and the challenge of students. So, in my perspective, first when I joined to school feeding program, when I went to the students, I observed lots of issues and problems of students even to attend class. Therefore, the higher officials and policymakers has to give priority for the future generation. And because now we were facing challenge, some of the cabinet members, they were challenging us not to work on school feeding program. They always say, no, we do have another priority issue, this thing, this project, this thing. But in my experience, the school feeding program is an investment. It's creating a generation. It will have a very good return back. Therefore, policymakers and also higher authorities has to focus in work for the next generation. And also, food is a right. Some students were coming to school without lunch box. They were suffering to attend class. They were hungry to attend class, and they were suffering a lot. Therefore, working in school feeding has so many advantages. Regarding to right, it's the right of children to get food. One, in terms of fighting wasting, stunting, and malnutrition, it's a very good tool. If we work it with collaborating with health sector and the different other sectors, it's easy to provide a very nutritious and healthy product in school, like iron or other supplements, very easily. Therefore, if we incorporate it with school feeding program, it's a very good tool to provide many packages and to accomplish very good output. And also, for example, in Ethiopia, in this context, the mayors or the higher authority attention always matters to implement programs. It's because of the political support. The politicians, like the mayor, was our core supporter in implementing this program. Without the mayor, it was really, really difficult. For example, we established more than 240 kitchens in 1 year, and also increasing from 20,000, from 30,000 to 400,000 beneficiaries of students. So this all happens because of the support of the mayors and political initiative. Making it a political agenda is a very key issue to implement this program.
That's so powerful. Thank you so much for sharing your story. It's really inspiring to hear all your valuable work and kind of hearing your powerful lessons and messages, and I'm sure our listeners will take them gladly into account. And I do wish you all the best for the future of the program, and a very good start to the new school year on Monday.
But thank you. Bye bye.
I am so impressed by Meti's work and her team really building a program that is really exemplary, using public procurement to enable change. And I'm really inspired. I mean, how the program managed to improve the levels of nutrition in schools, to kind of work with and connect farmers and schools to use local ingredients, to connect it to educating the next generation, and to create job opportunities for women, for the moms of the children that then eat the meals. And I think this is a very holistic example of how public food procurement can make a difference, and how important it is to use it for the advantage of entire communities. So thank you again to Meti for joining us today and telling us her story. I wish her and the program, yeah, all the best for future endeavors. And to learn more about the program of Addis Ababa, you can check the episode description for more information. And if you like this episode, you can support us by sharing it with your colleagues and friends. And we also invite you to listen to all the other episodes of this podcast, and to connect with us on Twitter or on the websites at the UN, One Planet Network, as well as Equally Local Governments for Sustainability. Thank you so much for listening. Bye bye.